What is going on, guys? Here we are. I don't even know what episode this is anymore of the Last Inning Touchdown podcast or the Lit podcast. I am joined with somebody different today. It is my boy Sam. Logan was not able to do the podcast this week. He had some stuff come up, so we got the one, the only. We're gonna call him the fantasy expert here. Sam, Sam. I'm giving you that title here. You're now the fantasy expert.
I just have to be better than both of you guys, I guess. So I'll take it for now.
Hey, that's true. So we usually we get started here at the Lit Podcast with MLB baseball to get started. So the big signing, the Tigers signed Robbie Grossman.
Yeah, that was it. That was all that happened today, right?
That's all that happened in the world of baseball.
Was there anything else? Nothing else came across my desk.
No, I don't think so. No.
The Mets made the big splash. With the new ownership coming in, you had to imagine they were going to do something. There was something in the works, and we found out what it was.
And I think the scary part is for me being a Marlins fan is that I don't think the Mets are done either. So obviously we haven't said it yet, but the Mets go ahead and they trade for Francisco Lindor. And the part that is even more crazy is they got Carlos Carrasco too.
Yeah,
I didn't know Carrasco was even a part of this. I knew that Lindor was a possibility. I mean, the Mets were rumored to get Lindor, but I had no idea that they were going to pull off this Carrasco as well. So I mean that's two big players possibly for them. Carrasco came off a really great season.
Two people that'll be here.
I mean, he had a great season for a shortened season. I know he's had his health issues unbaseball related, but he's, I don't know, man, that's a big deal. I mean, they gave up Rosario, Jimenez, Wolf, and Green, but I know that they managed to keep one of their top prospects too, so they didn't even give up the whole farm system to get him.
Yeah. You would think like a deal like that would have had to include, a Dominic Smith or, some sort of bat that is, MLB ready right now. Like, not saying Ahmed Rosario isn't, but it's one of those things that, like, you thought maybe there could have been more, but as from the Indians' perspective, the longer they held on to him, the less they were going to get. And I think that they kind of, it makes you kind of wonder what other deals were on the table. I would love to get inside like a GM's head as far as, finding out exactly, did the Cardinals have an offer out there? I know they've been rumored to try to go for like an Arenado or whatnot, but I've always said I think a Lindor would be a much more interesting pickup to me. He's younger. He's a switch hitter. He plays a premium position already. You got to sign him to it. It's one of those things you got to sign for him as soon as you get after you get the trade, just like a Goldschmidt. So,
and I think the Mets are definitely going to do that too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's going to be north of $250 million is what it's going to end up being. But they have a person that they can build their franchise around. Not only now, but someone they can gear towards the future as well. Not saying that they already have really really good players in place. The thing with the Mets, and it's a recurring issue over the last 15 years is just staying healthy. That's their Achilles heel, and no pun intended, but it's all about staying healthy, which is why I love how they got Carrasco in it, because not only do they get two names that are going to be on their starting rotation, starting lineup come opening day, but they got a good Carlos Carrasco is not a bad four-starter, so and with the other guy, with the other horses they have on top, with the ground, with Syndergaard coming back from the injury, with Stroman re-signing, like that's a pretty decent lineup so far, and they have to compete with the Braves, and they can't just let them run away with it. So if you're a Mets fan, you love to see something like this and seeing them going out and actually spending some money. We haven't seen that since they had Johan Santana. So
unfortunately, the Mets in the past, their money spent has not turned out. Jason Bay,
exactly.
Yoenis Cespedes, even Johan was kind of not
Yeah,
not everything they expected there.
they went and made that last big splash for whenever they got Johan and whenever they got Francisco Rodriguez and then whenever they got Jason Bay and like it was like Johan was okay, but the other three were like there's a lot of money going at this team, but at the time Jose Reyes and David Wright were taking up a big portion of their cap and Beltran, so I like what they did. I think it's great for. Obviously it's great for the Mets because they're ready to go now. And I honestly don't think they had to give up as much as they maybe thought so going into a trade like that. And I think a lot of, people are kind of opening their eyes. Like, you can't judge a trade right now. This trade's a trade that you're going to have to judge, 2, 3, even 5 years down the road to see what those prospects become. But, if it's anything half of what Lindor is, like, that's
I think
great.
the Mets have already, like, they're already happy with this trade. Unless I mean, it would take a lot to not be happy with this trade. Like, it would really to make this a bust. No matter what happens with the players they gave up, they're happy with who they got more than likely. I mean, it would take, unfortunately, like career-ending type stuff to really make this a complete bust.
Right.
But I mean, I think it's interesting. I read a report that the Dodgers were also a big player in this, and they weren't willing to budge on their prospects. Was the phrase I heard? And looking at this from the Mets, it's like, man, what prospects were they asking for that they weren't willing to budge on?
Exactly.
Like the Mets didn't give up much.
Right.
So.
Because, going from a Dodgers perspective, you would think a trade that involves Lindor is immediately going to get a return of a Gavin Lux. Someone who's, young, but MLB ready now to build the team around. And I think that's why Ahmed Rosario was also, included in this trade. They got to have someone to replace that hole up there. So, I would have thought, it would have been a Lux. And I would have thought it would have taken more, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But, you were surprised by these trades all the time, and it was one of those things that I'm sure the Cleveland Indians were like, hey, let's just the longer we wait, the less we're going to get. If we hold on to him for the entire season and don't get someone that that bites on it, then we only get a draft pick out of it. They can get like a comp draft pick because he would sign for X amount of dollars or whatever. But it's just, I don't know. It is what it is. Hey, they make more money than I do, so they must know something that's going on. But as a baseball fan, I love seeing the Mets go out and get a one of the premier names in the game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because Logan and I had discussed this too. That when we first talked about when Lindor went on the block, we said that Lindor is one of those players that fits on every team in the major leagues.
Yeah,
every team in the major leagues would love to have a Lindor, and so we kind of played the what if kind of game. And like I'm looking at it, and I remember thinking like, man, if the Marlins go after Lindor, I don't know if I like that because I was in my mind picturing one of your top pitchers is going to have to come off the board to get Lindor, and maybe the Marlins aren't there yet to where they're willing to give up a top pitching prospect for him, because you don't necessarily know what you have. And so I was a little concerned about that. And then so it's kind of like, man, it didn't take a top pitching prospect. They didn't actually, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if this Josh Wolf, I don't even think he's like a big name at all. I mean, this really came across as kind of like a salary dump. We can't re-sign him kind of trade. Yeah. And so it is interesting. And now it makes me wonder too. I mean, we've seen Cleveland kind of just shopping off all their pieces. And there were rumors that Jose Ramirez might be traded. I don't know if it was a Lindor or Ramirez situation, or if Jose Ramirez might find himself out of Cleveland as well. I mean, that's another player that I feel like he could fit on pretty much every ball club and could make a huge difference. But I think it's interesting that if Lindor is the first, I wonder from the Mets' perspective if getting this Lindor trade was kind of like the first domino, and now we're gonna just start seeing them build the rest of this team here.
Right.
Like, is this where are they gonna go sign the George Springer now that's been rumored since day one? Are they gonna? I mean, I've even seen. Are they gonna possibly just make the huge splash, get Bauer as well, and just really stack up?
That's also what I also think, in both teams' case, you can really say that the first domino has fallen, and the Mets have made a few of the smaller moves. I think they got what's his face, the good young catcher,
James
McCann. They got a good good catcher to back up this solid rotation and whatnot. But I think that was more of like to just solidify the actual position itself and make sure that there's not a hole in that come opening day. But yeah, this could very well be the first domino as far as the Mets going out and making splashes. There are very big names that are out there. Their owner has said he's going to spend money, and then on the Cleveland side, again, the domino has fallen. So we'll see if they hold on to Jose Ramirez and maybe try to up his value a little bit. Maybe try to get him to a contender at the trade deadline, maybe get a little more in return. Yeah, and like you said, like what are there may be two teams that probably couldn't just slap a Francisco Lindor, on their team and instantly be better. So, I'm sure there were plenty of offers. So it makes you kind of wonder what offers were not accepted and what offers were on the table that maybe you and I maybe think would be like better offers, but maybe they see something else in these other prospects.
It's crazy too because Lindor's only 27. So,
right, he's 27.
He's
so
entering
his
prime. He's just now entering his prime. I don't know, man. I think the Mets have stolen the face of New York here. This may be the guy who is the face of New York here for the next 5-6 years.
Big name, and probably Cleveland probably thought of that. That's they probably told themselves like, hey, if we're trading this guy, he's going to an NL team and a team that we don't play a whole bunch. That's probably why I doubt any teams in the AL Central even had a chance to gab him because they're like, I'm not playing against this guy.
Yeah, and I think
I don't blame him.
What's really crazy here is you've got the NL East and the NL West that the top that are they're just tooling. Yeah. I mean the entire NL East right now, minus the Phillies, is pretty solid. I mean, even the Marlins
have a great roster.
The Marlins are respectable, and the Phillies just got a new GM who I think is going to want to make some moves. I think that they're not out of it. So, and I mean, they have Harper. They signed Harper that big money. They're not going to rebuild, so they're going to have to do something.
Right.
And so
they need to figure it out because I think in Realmuto's deal done at the end of this year.
Realmuto's a free agent right now.
Okay, so are they going to sign him?
Because the rumors were the Mets were going to sign him originally, and then
that's right.
And then that obviously they didn't do that. So there is talks that maybe Philly goes and gets it back now, but that Philly the rumor was the Philly didn't quite have as much money to play with, that they lost a bunch of money in this last COVID season. So my thought is that they may be waiting till closer to spring training and trying to sign some of these guys that, like, hey, if you want to play, it's going to be, cheaper. Like, so
right. Maybe 1 year deals, maybe just bridge the gap deals. Maybe you steal your, you get your World Series trophy like that, and then it's done. Like no one cares when it comes down to it. As long as you're on there, doesn't matter if it was a rental or not. So maybe especially with COVID coming up, like with the way that it's impacted, some of these contracts, some of these teams, this money influx situation. I think you're going to see a lot of like shorter term. Big dollar amount deals. Like, you may see a 1 year, for a Trevor Bauer, one team may be like, hey, dude, I'll give you, $35-40 million to just play for us for a year. Like, I don't have money to sign that $300+ million one. But if you would come here for a year and prove yourself, like on our team and our threads, have a chance to, win a World Series and, go to a championship and whatnot, like, be my guest. And then he might just be like, well, that's the best offer I got because I don't want to go to some of the other teams that are maybe offering me big money. So you may see something like that happen. I absolutely believe it.
Right. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned Trevor Bauer in that kind of contract too, because I don't know if I'm personally a team. I personally am not a huge fan that Trevor Bauer is as good as he was last year. He has never been that good for any real season. He's had like maybe two good seasons in his career. And I would be very concerned to give him, the 1.73 ERA he had last year type money when in his career he's more like a 4 ERA type pitcher. I'd be very concerned. So that may be I give you 1 or 2 years at a huge amount. And if you do your thing, great. You did your thing for me. But I don't know. I don't think I could give him anything longer because I don't know that I trust him to actually be as good as he was. And so I don't know. I think that is an interesting idea for Bauer because Bauer's a tough one for me because his numbers last year were so different than his career averages that it would scare me as a team to give him big money as a pitcher.
Right, and totally understand that, but we see it all the time.
Oh yeah.
Pitchers take a little time. They'll come out of the woodwork and be unbelievable for 3-4 years. That might be the only knock on Bauer is that it was a very short season. But everyone goes through the same things, and it's not like he didn't have the numbers to back it up. He brought home some hardware. Some people put an asterisk next to it, but hey, he's there. So he had the numbers as far as everything up and down the line. I think he was either close or won the pitching triple crown. I think he was like second ERA or something like that.
He won the ERA title. I don't think he was strikeouts.
I don't. Yeah,
I think
Yu
Darvish had more strikeouts. I think.
That's right. So the numbers are there. It's not like it's just like an outlier season where like, oh well, other teams made contact on him, they just didn't get on base. It's just bad luck, and those things happen. Like a Kyle Loesch or Joel Pinheiro back when they played for the Cardinals. I feel like every single time, like you'd watch him play, and you're like, boy, they don't miss a lot of barrels. And you look at the score, they give up 2 runs over 7 innings, and they only had like 2 strikeouts. You're like, how does that even happen?
Yeah,
but the numbers are there to back it up. Someone will offer him a big contract if it's for 1 year or 2 years. That'll be what it is. But I think that's the only reason that with the COVID situation that something like that does happen. I don't see a big $200+ million deal coming his way for 5+ years or anything like that. Right. I think it's just going to be a rental till they kind of figure out exactly what the what the situation is, get a better grasp on it, maybe this time next year. The fans and stuff, because I think they're losing revenue on ticket sales, on concession sales, everything. So not a lot of people are going to want to take a huge plunge like that and commit to someone for 5+ years, regardless of how good they are. So
yeah, and I think what you just said there too is interesting, and I think that's why teams like the Indians are trying to get these trades done as soon as possible. Like even the Cubs, like they're departing with their players like before the year even starts, even though they had a division winner. And I think a lot of that plays into the fact that like we're all assuming that baseball's going to start on time, but what if it doesn't play until June? And then these teams are taking no revenue to June. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, in June, you still can't have full fan bases. And it's like these teams are just eating more and more money. And it's like, so some of these teams want to get these deals done now so they don't have to keep eating this money if something happens. I mean, because they're not making hardly any revenue at all right now. I'm sure that all their sponsors are like, well, you have to play games to get money. So, I think that's tough. And I could see Trevor Bauer, honestly, becoming I keep seeing this little rumor of Bauer going to the Angels, and all I can think about is CJ Wilson going to the Angels, and that's what it makes me think think is CJ Wilson had one good year, gets signed by the Angel for a fat contract.
Yeah, the Angels, I think they signed Hamilton, Pujols, and CJ Wilson.
Yeah, like all
in the exact same. What they spent like a
crazy money.
half a
yeah, it was some. I think it was. And I remember at the time too. It was the year that the Marlins spent a bunch of money that year too, and I was mad that they didn't get CJ Wilson. I wanted CJ Wilson.
Yeah, you got Heath Bell instead.
And he would have fit right on that team because the whole Marlins squad, all they did was poop the bed the whole time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that brings me up. To kind of get things going is. My next thing is the next big name that's going to get sold. Is it going to be from the Chicago Cubs? They have plenty of big names that are, they already moved Darvish. Mm-hmm. They have plenty of huge names, Baez, Contreras, Bryant, and I think Rizzo is up at the end of the year as well. So, like, again, the same thing as Lindor. The longer they hold on to him, the less they're going to get. I know Contreras apparently is rumored. The Angels might be interested in him, as well as the Phillies might be interested in not re-signing Realmuto, but doing a trade to get Contreras in there. And I've heard a few things say that Chris Bryant to the things they're just saying like he'd be a great fit in like someone like Atlanta.
I've heard the Nationals.
I've also heard the Nationals, and
I think that would be an interesting one too. I mean, because the Nationals, I think the Nationals have. They haven't added a ton, but I think Chris Bryant, assuming that he could play anything resembling what he's played in the past, would be huge for them there because they really could use more offense. They've got the pitching, they've got the star in Juan Soto. They just need the pieces around him. I mean, Trey Turner's a stud, but other than that, they're they're struggling and they need more pieces. And so
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting one as well. And I've heard Contreras could possibly be on the move as well. So it is an interesting thought because I do think that the Cubs are one of those other teams that is kind of obviously dismantling here, and they are doing it quickly. They seem to want to be getting this done. So I do wonder if these kind of deals pull off. And I mean, it's interesting though because it's like Lindor was kind of like, yeah, Lindor's on the block. And then all of a sudden it's just, boom, Lindor's traded.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh.
It's one of those things like people always say, oh, this person's on the block. And it's like a huge name. And you're like, yeah, but like,
right.
what's it going to take to get someone like that? No way.
Right. I mean, we hear it every offseason,
yeah.
like, oh, so-and-so's on the move, and then they never go anywhere. I mean, how long have we been hearing Arenado's going to be traded? I mean, that guy's been traded, traded for like 6 years.
He's been traded for 3 years, yeah. To every team imaginable, too.
Right.
So, I mean, AL teams, NL teams, everyone at some point has been rumored to an Arenado trade. So, but yeah. So, I mean, so far with MLB, some of the kick in the can, that might be the first domino to fall, to use that expression again, as far as, the actual trade market. So now people see kind of what the value is. So you might see a few more trades start happening here, before the end of NFL playoffs.
And then it makes me wonder too, we hear that the Dodgers were very close as well with Lindor, but didn't quite want to match up on who.
Can you imagine that?
Who the Indians wanted though. But so then that makes me wonder, if the Dodgers just missed out on the guy they were trying for, okay, well, who's number 2 now? And
they're going all in on yeah.
So are they going to go after Arenado, or even like because I mean thinking about it, Lindor, Arenado, could Chris Bryant be possibility for Dodgers as well? That hasn't really been a rumor,
easily.
But it's like he's still right there. I mean, he's right there in the same position that we're talking about. So it would. I mean, I could because they need to replace Justin.
Turner, though.
No, well, Justin Turner's a free agent, so that's why they're looking for someone.
So that would just
or
be a plug and play.
Do they say, well, we missed out on Lindor, let's bring Turner back? I do wonder if Lindor was one. I mean, now that there's quite a few big pieces that have moved in these last couple weeks, but I do wonder now. With Lindor, who was kind of that focal point of like, this is a big name that's going to get traded this offseason. Like Yu Darvish was kind of out of the blue. Like no one saw Yu Darvish getting traded really. Like that was not really even, not to mention the fact that they did it like 20 minutes after trading for Blake Snell.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, which was crazy too, because really like there was those little bit of rumors that like, oh, Tampa Bay might trade Snell. But like Tampa Bay might trade anybody. So it was like, So, but like Lindor this whole offseason has been like, he's gonna get traded. They want to trade him. And now that piece has fallen. So I wonder how many teams were waiting for that to start moving.
Exactly. Because if Lindor goes to a team that is in your division and you're kind of thinking about making a move and he goes to someone in your division, well, guess what? You pretty much made your decision for you. Like you have to go and make your team somewhat better in some way, shape, or form. So a lot of people are just like, it's kind of like the Wild West. Everyone's kind of squared off, and they're like, "Hey, someone's going to shoot first, and once they do, then everything's going to go crazy. The whole saloon's going to get lit up." So, to use an expression. So, I think that was the shot. That obviously, I think the Snell deal, the Darvish deal, kind of got the pitching market moving, and I think this is the last shot before everything kind of starts. We're going to kind of start seeing some of the shadows come out as far as what teams are going to end up being.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to move us on to something else, but if you've got
Perfect.
a little
No, go ahead. No, I had nothing else.
All right. Well, so I was just the other thing that's been talked about in the media lately of baseball world, and I do think some of it's because it's been slower, is this Hall of Fame ballot stuff. And so I'm not going to get into all the what 10 players would you put in the Hall of Fame? Like top 10 players in the Hall of Fame. But I do keep hearing this back and forth of this whole, should Baseball Hall of Fame have like this morality clause, basically? Like, they keep saying, like, that's the big thing with this whole class, basically. This whole ballot. Whether it be steroids or whatever, there's all kinds of issues that are on this ballot. So I mean, obviously, we know all about the steroid guys, like this whole steroid era. That's the whole thing. And then you've got like Omar Vizquel, who's got this domestic violence thing going on at home now, and like Kurt Schilling with his off the wall Twitter account that says things he shouldn't be saying. And then
R.I.P. 989 Sports.
and then you got like Andrew Jones, who I guess has some sexual, you know, accusation, and Manny Ramirez with some accusation. It's like, so at what point do we say that that has nothing to do with baseball and put him in the Hall of Fame, or do we say that that still matters? And so I think it's interesting because you got the two sides of it, because you got the steroid people and then you got these personal issue people. And so my first thought, and I'm just gonna get this going with the whole: do I believe the steroid people should be in the Hall of Fame? And I believe that the steroid people who did not get suspended for steroids should be allowed in the Hall of Fame.
So people in the steroid era who did not get,
as long as
we're
you,
not involved
as long
in the
as
ball co scandal or anything,
right,
like that,
as long,
as
well,
long as they
so
were
what I'm getting
quote,
at is
unquote, clean, they're good.
I'm saying, I'm not even saying that. What I'm saying is if you played during a time period that they weren't testing and saying you can't do this, so as long as you were playing, you know, Barry Bonds is a great example. So Barry Bonds, well, I didn't actually, did Bonds test positive at the end of his career? Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think so.
It was all
okay. So it was all okay.
I don't
so
think he ever texted. I think
that's
he was
what I
just
thought.
involved in
So like my thought is like a guy like Manny Ramirez, who ended up testing positive near the end of his career, and you know,
I think numerous times.
A couple times.
Numerous times.
So a guy like him is out for me. You cannot make it because you were suspended for breaking the rules. Okay. But a guy like Barry Bonds, to me, it was frowned upon, but technically baseball didn't say you couldn't do it.
Right.
So it's like, I get it, but it's like, I get that we were saying like, oh, you shouldn't have done it. But it's like, you're asking these guys who are trying to perform for money at the top level and saying, don't do everything available to make yourself the best player possible. It's not like there was a rule that said don't take steroids. At the time, there wasn't a whole lot of information about steroids to begin with. These guys knew you recovered faster and they knew it made you a lot stronger. Well, you're a professional athlete. If you could recover faster and get a lot stronger, why would you not do it?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer.
So it's like, as long as, to me, since my thought is if there's no rules, then I don't think that you did not get suspended for it. You didn't break the rules.
Right, you were just hold it against
you were just trying to be the best player you could be. And the other side of that too is, though, Barry Bonds' numbers, yes, historically are insane. But what I'm getting at here is he was the best player of his era. You can't just say, oh, you can't be in the Hall of Fame because you took steroids. Well, so did at least half the people he was playing against.
Right.
So it's like he did all that against people who were also using performance enhancing whatever.
Exactly.
And so it's
it was a level playing field back in the day. You know, it was the Wild Wild West. You know, the late 90s, early 2000s. Like, it's, you know, the big names you hear about, those are, you know, there's plenty of people that were awful that were still doing it as well. So
it's and Bonds was really, really good before then. You can easily tell by
Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before 2001.
Right. And so then it's like, and then he started taking them and got a lot bigger, but it kept him healthy, it kept him playing, and it kept him producing at an age you normally wouldn't keep producing. And I get that, but it wasn't against the rules. It wasn't, you know, so it's like, I don't know. To me, he did it when everybody else was doing it. Everybody pitching against him was doing it. Everybody who's hitting against him was doing it. I just don't think that you can take a whole era and say you can't make it in the Hall of Fame when they didn't technically break any of the rules.
Right.
You know, when you're a guy like Alex Rodriguez, who should have been literally thrown out of baseball because you broke it so many times that you actually got to the point where you should have never played baseball again, but baseball said, we're not actually going to enforce that.
Right.
I mean, that's another story. But to me, I mean, it's an era. You can just refer to it as the steroid era and say these were the best players of the steroid era. And a lot of times I think we need to stop taking, and I get it, like the all-time greats, like you want to compare people across generations, but that's not fair in any sports. It's really not. It's not fair to compare players who are playing right now to players who were playing in 1920. It's just
The game evolves too fast.
It is just,
every 10 years there's a different trend.
Even without the game itself, the technology and the mindset for how players just work out is way more than anything it's ever been. Players, right. I mean, the worst players in the major leagues right now would have been stars in 1920.
Yeah.
Because it's not even close to the same game, so it's not fair. So you just need to we just need to take players and compare them against who they played against. Who did you play against? Were you a top 10 player for this many years against the people
for the generation that you played?
Yeah, and if you were,
I love that.
Hall of Fame. I mean, it's that
absolutely.
simple. I mean, if you were a top player for a considerable amount of time for your generation, you're in. I mean, that's like saying, oh, nobody in the dead ball era could make it in because no one was hitting home runs then. Well, that's not fair to that. Right. That's just that is what it is.
I love that. I love it's and that's my big thing is, hey, like my thing when it comes to Hall of Fame, can you tell the story of baseball? Can you tell history of baseball to someone who doesn't know anything about baseball without saying their name?
Right.
Can you? If you have to say their name, they probably belong in the Hall of Fame. Like if someone's like, oh, well, who has the most hits in MLB career? And they're like, well, Ichiro technically, but Pete Rose kind of like, oh, well, he's probably in the Hall of Fame. No, he's not.
Right. And so that's where it's
why not?
That's where it's really tough.
So you're telling me the guy that leads in home runs and the guy that leads in hits over an entire career, both of those guys aren't in the Hall of Fame, and they won't understand why. And I love that you said, it was a comparison of what you were against your generation. And that's really what it is. Like, because, people back in the dead ball era, people back, when Babe Ruth, hit a whole bunch of home runs, like there's plenty of Hall of Famers that are just like, they batted like freaking 340 every single year. But, you compare them to, players now, like they wouldn't even crack the Mendoza line.
Right, and that's
like they're just it's not about skill base. It's about numbers, and I understand that some of those numbers are inflated and whatnot. But like you said, like it was a level playing field. There was plenty of people that were taking it as well, and I'd be shocked to hear that that weren't everyone. Like it was.
I just honestly, for the most part, and that's the other thing too is like. People don't realize it now. So, I mean, I even say this all the time. Like a guy like Robinson Cano, who just tested positive again. My thought process is Robinson Cano took those with the intention that he was going to get away with it. I mean, he didn't take performance enhancing things and say, haha, I'm going to go get suspended.
Haha. So
the thought is, if a guy like Robinson Cano took them thinking he was going to get away with it, that means there's people getting away with it.
Oh God! Absolutely. So with the advances in technology and the advances in how they can make some sort of a pill or some sort of an injection. Steroids are taken both ways. The way that they can mask them to look like just something else.
And and the thing is too, that doesn't even think about the fact that like. How big are some of these guys that are coming up that are like 21 years old? And it's like, how much do they test in college? How much is anyone paying attention to them in high school? It's like, I mean, look at how big Mike Trout is. That dude is massive.
Right.
He may be, don't get me wrong, he may be natural, great, hope he is. But he also could have been juicing himself up in high school so that he could be a stud player. And it's just carried over now. Because he built that core of muscle back when he was then. You really don't know. You don't have any idea what these people did. And when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter how big and strong you are. You don't hit a 99 mile an hour fastball and then a 70 mile an hour changeup because of steroids. You don't hit those pitches because you took steroids. So it's
still
like
the hardest thing you do in sports. So
and that's I don't know. The whole steroid thing to me is whatever. I understand banning it because we know it's not healthy. It's horrible for these guys' health. I get why it's banned, but I don't think that that these people that did it during an era where I bet almost everybody was doing it. I mean, solely comparing it to what the Astros did in the world in that whole trash can banging thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a guy in that clubhouse. You're not gonna say, oh, you know what? I don't want someone to tell me what pitch is coming, and then strike out and lose the game for your team.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be the guy in the clubhouse not taking steroids, getting bigger and stronger just because it's against your morals. Oh, my morals hurt. Like, no. But it's like you're not going to be that guy that's possibly costing your team being the only one not doing it. It's just that's not how a clubhouse works. That's not how being on a team works. Like, because what happens when the 4 guys in the minor leagues are juicing and they play the same position as you? Well, all of a sudden you go on a 10-game slump and you're like, man, those guys are all juicing and getting big and strong and trying to take my position. I guarantee you it's way more people than we thought, and that's why we need to stop worrying about it. And the only so to me the whole steroid thing for me is if you didn't break the rules and get suspended, then it shouldn't count against you, because there wasn't anything that said you couldn't do it. It was just frowned upon.
Right.
It is what it is.
And keep in mind, steroids, they saved baseball.
Absolutely. Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire
1998 that
saved baseball.
Single-handedly saved baseball. For people that don't know what I'm talking about, back in 1994, there was a strike because baseball players were not getting paid enough. Well, they signed a collective bargaining agreement with the actual Players Association and whatnot. It was only for 6 years, so it only went to 2000. There was not a lot of interest in baseball before these guys started pumping out 70 home runs. That pumped so many fans in seats, so many ticket sales, so many TV deals, and that's why you got ridiculous, lucrative contracts that are coming out now.
And
now, it does need to be tweaked and whatnot, but it saved baseball. So
I would, regardless of career numbers, to me, Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire should be in the Hall of Fame solely because of 1998.
Because of that, exactly.
That season alone was one of the greatest things to ever happen in baseball.
Yep.
And they both had the career numbers to be considered anyway, so it's not like, they were one-year flukes. So to me, they need to be in the Hall of Fame because they were such a big part of bouncing baseball back.
Right. Yep, absolutely.
The only other side of that, though, is these guys with this domestic violence and these sexual assaults and stuff like that. And I don't know. The thing is,
everyone has skeletons, man. Everyone has baggage. The only reason that we hear about this stuff now is because social media is not what it was back in the 1980s, 1990s, even the early 2000s. People don't know stuff like that. It's just now because it's so easy for that stuff to go public, and that's that easy for that stuff to just go viral. Like before, it was just a beat writer that knew it, or, an insider, an MLB insider or something. He's the only person who knew about it. He was like, I'll keep it hush. That's kind of private.
Yeah, or it's the team insider who's getting free dinners every night because he knows about the guys.
Now as soon as someone who wants their 230 followers to know about it tweets something out like that, then it's just an allegation, and then it just spreads like wildfire, just on Twitter, Facebook, stuff like that, even Instagram, stuff like that. So
I think that
it's completely different. There were plenty of domestic charges.
Once again, I think it's one of those things that I think in this situation too, if you are convicted of it, if in the court of law says yes, you assaulted this woman or sexually assaulted this woman, then that's a different story. These allegations can be whatever. You can't ruin a guy's baseball career just because someone said this happened. If the court of law says, yes, this happened, you're in trouble, that's one thing. It's another to say, yeah, you guys had a little issue there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just... Yeah. And I think Ken Rosenthal came out on MLB Network and showed his list, and he basically said, I made my list this year saying I'm not the morality police. He said, and part of me regretted it as soon as I turned it in. But he said, at the end of the day, I had to pick something, and I chose to not be the morality police on this ballot. And part of me thinks that's the way to go, and I understand his dilemma. I understand that's his dilemma, and I think someone even said it might have been him that said there's a ton of bad guys that are in the Hall of Fame.
Oh God, yeah.
We just didn't know anything. We just don't know anything about it.
Along the way, someone's been involved in a murder or something like that back in the day. There has to be. There's no way there's not.
Right, absolutely. But there's something. I mean, I don't know. I just don't think. I get it. Yeah. I get why people, we don't want to celebrate that kind of person. I get that.
Yeah,
but it's
who am I to be judge and jury for like someone's, personal issues? I don't care what he did on and off the field. What did he do on the field? That's what you get things for.
And that's how football does it now. I think football's Hall of Fame I think it's a little too open door, but I mean,
it's just because the shelf life for an NFL player is 2
Right.
3 years, something
Right,
like that.
and
So you don't really
football
have to do
massively
back
changes
up to your
every
peers.
10 years. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think baseball. I love how like hard it is to get in the Hall of Fame. It makes it very prestigious to make it. But I do think this whole morality, steroid, whatever your personal life is, I think in all of these situations, if you just say unless there's a conviction, I'm not the morality police, and be done with it.
Right.
So my two takeaways on Hall of Fame. I'm not morality police unless you were convicted or punished by MLB, and compare each player to who they played against, and that's it on whether or not they should make it. Simple as that.
Cool. Sold.
Simple as
I'm
that.
in. I'm in.
So, I think that ends baseball. We can move on to the NFL here on the Last Inning Touchdown Podcast, the Lit Podcast. You can find us at Last Inning TD on Twitter, and we are on Spotify and YouTube. So, football. We have completed the football season. So we've got a little playoff action this weekend, which is kind of cool. Got some good teams.
Triple header.
Double triple header. I was looking at that when I got on. I was like, oh, 3 games Saturday, 3 games Sunday.
It'll be awesome. It'll be as a football fan, it'll be
a lot
awesome.
of football.
Cool to watch. Plenty of great match. I mean, obviously every matchup in the playoffs is good, but there are a lot of intriguing matchups too. So
yeah, I will save the weekly pick'em that myself and Logan does for when Logan returns. So we will get those final numbers and see who got more correct teams throughout the regular season. We will do that next time when Logan is here. But I have Sam here for, wild card weekend, basically. No, so
yeah.
I mean, we got a lot of good games. To wrap up the season, there was some very interesting stuff. I mean, I know Washington and Dallas were right down to that last day of who was going to make it, and Dallas kind of pooped the bed. Washington Football Club, interestingly enough, somehow makes it. Chicago, another not great team, makes it. But it is going to be an interesting little playoff because I think, as in any sports, once you make it, anything can happen. So,
yeah,
should be an interesting weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So with the fantasy season, I know I called you fantasy expert as we got started here on the baseball side of it. Who was a guy? Let's start positive. Who was somebody on your fantasy team this year that really showed up for you that you were very excited about?
So I did a lot of digging as far as, I try to find value late in rounds. Obviously, that's where fantasy seasons are won. That's where fantasy seasons are, essentially lost because you don't have any depth. Someone that goes out, gets a Jordy Nelson, in the 10th round, as opposed to going for a guy that, may have a little bit higher of a ceiling. Those are the guys that you can probably kind of weed out right off the bat. But my MVP, I ended up getting Kyler in the 6th round. He was a guy that I had circled on my board. After he had addition of Hopkins, I saw how he was used I saw how Kyler was used in the offense with Cliff Kingsbury, and I figured, hey, only add a better weapon, so Christian Kirk isn't your number one guy, would only help. So I was able to get Kyler in the 6th. I think I passed over Dak. I passed over Rodgers, but I mean, no one really had a lot of intent for Rodgers. But my real big sleeper pick that I was in all my mock drafts, I always paid attention to where he went, was Antonio Gibson. That was a person that I grabbed in the 10th round at the time. Whenever my draft was happening, Adrian Peterson was still on the Washington football team. So it was one of those things I was like, hey, you just wait, you just see what happens. The guy took snaps at running back, the guy took snaps at wide receiver. Like, this could be like the next great thing. So I just took a flyer on him. Hey, if you're playing grabbing a guy in the 10th round, odds are he's not going to make your starting lineup, really off week 1, 2, or 3. So I just grabbed him on just a flyer, and maybe 5 days, a week later, Peterson got released.
I'm pretty sure I sent you a text like right away, like saying, "Hey, Gibson's the starter, boy. Next Christian McCaffrey."
And I think I was telling you. I think I was telling you going into it. I was like, "Dude, do not sleep on Antonio Gibson. The guy is an absolute freak. Yep. He's so good." And I still don't think he's been completely unleashed. He's a guy in dynasty leagues. Or keeper leagues. I could see the guy going in the top 2 rounds. I don't think he's a first rounder, but he's for sure a second, third rounder. As far as the guy's his potential's only been tapped right now.
Well, and that's what's interesting is he's a guy that was putting up like 20, 30 points and
Yeah.
McKissick
Yeah,
or
all he's
whatever
doing
was
is
still
running.
McKissick
It
was
was
still
the
putting
pass
up
catcher.
picking up another
Yeah.
15, 20
He
points
was
too. And it was like,
he
dang,
was
dude, if you gave that all to Gibson, like
yeah,
Gibson could be
he was the pass
if
catcher.
Gibson could even take a little bit of that load, like he would have done even better. And so
And
it was very
and
interesting.
from the I don't know if you really keep track of that, but he was a guy that I really every single week I was looking at snaps, I was looking at touches, I was looking at routes run and stuff. And after the bye week, and that's usually whenever these rookies start taking off, they don't teams don't like to put an entire full workload on a rookie, a guy they just drafted. They don't want to put a full workload on him because they just wear down. They're not used to that NFL season yet. So usually, as far as a rookie's concerned, it's later on in the season, it's after the bye week. Is a really big focal point that you want to take a look at, because that's really whenever they're like, hey, we're going to give you 80% of snaps after this bye week. You come out, we want you to have your third down. You can come out when you're tired and whatnot, but the backfield is yours. You tell me when you want to come out, to take a breath, to play off 2 plays off. And you saw that with guys like Akers, with guys like Swift, with guys like Jonathan Taylor. You saw them, you actually get the full backfield. You can actually see what they actually become. And they haven't even gotten into Antonio Gibson's pass catching ability, because, like I said, the guy was a wide receiver. If you ever just want to be entertained for 10 minutes, just look up his highlight reel. At the University of Memphis. It's unbelievable. The guy, he's a great route runner. Like I said, he's only been tapped in the pass catching ability. And keep in mind, his coach is Ron Rivera, who also writes up, used to, call plays for none other than Christian McCaffrey. So I think in the future, and it may be reaching high, this guy could be a potential number 1 overall pick in fantasy football in the next 2 or 3 years. I think that the sky's the limit for the guy. He's unreal. We see what he can do on the ground, what he can do in open space. He has breakaway speed, 4.39 speed, and he can catch the ball. So it's he's a powerful runner. He's shifty. And as far as a pass catcher is concerned, it's only been tapped right now. So I'd love to see that get unleashed a little more next year, and he can take away some of McKissick's touches and kind of weed him out. But really excited for Antonio Gibson. Loved him all year.
Yeah, I also I was looking it up while you were talking about it. I drafted Antonio Gibson at 140th in my draft, and I also had Jonathan Taylor, who turned out to be pretty good.
Yeah,
which really saved me, because I had leaving the draft had the running back core of Josh Jacobs, Christian McCaffrey, and Chris Carson, thinking, man, I've got 3
didn't
running.
You also get Drake or something?
I do. I have Drake.
Yeah.
I have Drake on my
Drake.
bench, who was
I remember
whatever.
You were drafting. You were kind of telling me, like, hey, this guy's available. I was like,
Yeah.
Even though you have full running backs, grab him.
So
he's a starting running back.
And that doesn't even mention the fact that I had Kenny Galladay too. So my first 5 picks were McCaffrey, Galladay, Jacobs, Carson, Drake. And most of those turned out to be
4 of those guys ended up getting hurt at some point. Even
bust.
Jacobs was dinged up, so all 5 essentially. But I mean, it's NFL. But
but they were all busts. I mean, for the most part. I mean, Jacobs turned out to be running back 9, but like he was never really like
his
was just kind of
steady. The first 5-6 games of the year. Yeah,
he was kind of steady, but it wasn't like he wasn't winning.
He never
anything.
won you a week, but he never lost you a week.
And then Kenny Galladay played like 1 week the whole season. Christian McCaffrey played like 3 weeks the whole season.
Played 5 weeks, I think. Yeah.
And so I ended up getting lucky, and right before Chris Carson got hurt, when he was like running back number 5, when he was off to his good start, I flipped him for Tyreek Hill because I didn't have good receivers with Galladay hurt, and I had Lockett who was performing, but I was like, so I flipped him and got Tyreek Hill straight up for Chris Carson, which turned out well because Carson ended up being hurt literally almost the rest of the season after that trade.
Yeah.
And so that worked out nicely. And so then I traded some more depth and got DeAndre Hopkins as well, which really made my team solid. Having Gibson and Taylor, and so it was a great season for our sleepers, it seemed like. But all my starters are where I struggled. Nobody, all my high draft picks let me down, and I still made it, into the semifinals, where I unfortunately lost by a yard. That's all we need to know. I lost by a yard in the semifinals. to the guy who ended up winning the championship with his running back that was declared out on Friday, and he's left him in his lineup, and he still won the championship. But
That's fantastic. That's crazy.
That's fantasy for you.
It happens. Yeah, exactly. That's fantasy.
The big player for me, I always take the strategy of I almost never draft a quarterback. I draft quarterbacks I drafted Big Ben like, I don't know, probably my second to last pick in the draft as my starting quarterback.
Okay.
And then he was fine. He's Big Ben. He had big game potential, but most of the time he was 20 points, whatever. And so then about week 6, I said, I'm just going to take a flyer on this Justin Herbert guy.
Justin Herbert.
He's lighting it up. I was like, and the Chargers are always I was like, they are always. I was like, the Chargers are always making it interesting. Let's see what Herbert can do. And I stuck him in there, and I rode Herbert for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
he was a stud for me. I mean, he's absolutely awesome. So I'll give him my MVP just because he was. Since you said Gibson already, Taylor had a little lull in there that kind of let me down, where Herbert was just my steady as she goes. 25, 30 points a week quarterback. And that was just a nice steady points that my team needed that made me start winning. I was struggling there with my top picks not working out. The young running backs hadn't started doing really well yet. And so I was struggling. So once I got Herbert in there, it really, really steadied out my lineup for me. So that was kind of my MVP. Who was the most disappointing player on your roster this year?
Well, first, I think it'd be kind of disrespectful if we didn't say the fantasy MVP for the entire league, which is easily Stephon Diggs. There were some drafts that he was going 10th round, 11th round.
Absolutely.
And you're talking, he led the league in receptions. Unbelievable year. It's only going to get better.
Well, we had a guy trade for Stephon Diggs right before the season started.
Yeah,
and
he's a bona fide top 5 wide receiver.
It's going
to be the biggest jump that I can remember in fantasy football. A guy that was drafted in the 10th, 11th round last year is now hopping way up that high. It's such a consensus pick.
Yeah. So on September 9th, this trade goes through, and it's Chris Godwin and Phillip Rivers for Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, and Dak Prescott.
Wow, yikes.
And at the time, I was like, dang, he just gave up Dak Prescott, the possibly top 3 quarterbacks in the league, for Phillip Rivers, who's never been a good fantasy quarterback anytime recently. And then Chris Godwin, who I was super low on because I didn't think Tom Brady would do anything this year as far as like producing wide receivers for fantasy. So I was down on all the receivers in Tampa Bay this year. That was my thing. And so I was like, man, he just gave up Dak Prescott for, nothing basically in my mind. And my thought though at the time, I remember thinking, I was like, man, Stephon Diggs had always been quietly kind of good in Minnesota, but he was never the premier guy. And I was like, man, I wonder in Buffalo, is he going to pop off? I was like, man, I think this guy who got Prescott and Diggs is really going to win the trade. But I didn't think that Diggs was going to be that good. I was like, holy cow. I mean, now that guy was competing for last place the whole season. I don't know what other issues he struggled with.
What he saw, yeah.
But I mean, he ended up really struggling despite having Stephon Diggs. But yeah, Stephon Diggs was an absolute stud this season. You got to give him his props.
Yeah. So as far as disappointing players, every team has different disappointing players as far as I
already named mine. I already named like 5 for my team.
So. What they thought they were getting and whatnot. My most disappointing player, because I had such high expectations for him, was Miles Sanders. The guy had everything in front of him to gain. He's a pass catcher. He's a 3-down back. He's very explosive, which you got a few glimpses of this year. Breaking off huge runs against Baltimore and New Orleans. 2 of the best run defenses in the entire league. Busting off big 80+ yard runs and having I think it's yards per carry, like per attempt, was like top 2 in the NFL, and like they just never gave him the ball enough. And I don't know if it's necessarily all on him. Carson Wentz struggling for that as long as he did, definitely hurt. But whenever Jalen Hurts was in under center, you saw his reps started going up, his snaps started going up, his pass catching started going up, and they were able to run the ball a little more. And it's because they have to respect they have to respect what Jalen Hurts can do under center. He is very capable quarterback of taking off and, taking 15, 20 yards. It's just a hybrid quarterback. That's what the league's going to end up becoming at some point. If you're going to win, you got to have a quarterback that can move, on his legs as well. And he's a guy that I think a lot of people, and especially people that had him, are going to have a really bad taste in their mouth, from this
Right.
year, just because it was so disappointing. He had that little bit of an injury. Then it was, it's an offense. It's Doug Peterson's fault. It's Carson Wentz's fault. People are pointing fingers at the other, and then they end up pointing it at Miles Sanders, saying, "Oh, it's his fault. That he's the reason why you're not going." But he's a guy that I definitely have circled on my board, and if I can grab him in like the third, fourth round next year, I'm absolutely going to grab it, as long as Jalen Hurts is under center or anything like that, because he has all the talent in the world. Obviously, it depends on what the Eagles do in the off season, as far as what they do is draft picks and whatnot. So he's definitely a guy I have a look at, but. I think another, really, really disappointing, player or players. Obviously, you have to mention Michael Thomas. He got injured, week one. He played, didn't do well, got injured at the very end of the game. He was not injured during the game. He only got like 2-3 points, something like that, in different formats. It was under 5 for sure. Got the high ankle sprain, would never really bounce back from it. Then he got a hamstring strain while he was nursing the high ankle sprain. Then he got suspended for having a fight and then he comes back for 3-4 games, and it's Taysom Hill that's under center. So it's not Drew Brees that's peppering him with 15 plus targets. And then he bows out the last 2 weeks of the season to get healthy and whatnot for the playoffs. So a lot of people that took him were really frustrated. And I guess you could say the same with McCaffrey.
Yeah, that's exactly
every
how.
time he played, he averaged over 25, almost 30 points a game.
Yeah, McCaffrey went 28, 24, 37 in the 3 games he played.
It was one of those things you'd almost rather him, it be a Saquon Barkley situation, where it's like, and yeah, obviously he was disappointing as well, but at least you knew what you were getting every week with him. You knew he was out, like Christian McCaffrey. Every single week, it went from out to doubtful to questionable. Oh, well,
and that's what's tough is like Saquon Barkley right away was done for the year.
It was second week.
Where McCaffrey and Galladay, for me, sat on my bench. They sat on my bench the whole season because they kept possibly coming back, and then they didn't, and then they were maybe questionable. Nope, questionable.
I'd rather have Saquon.
I would have rather just been able to just
know what I have to do. There's no hope at the end of the tunnel. That's like your mom. Hey, can my buddy spend the night? Say, we'll see. That's a we'll see.
Yeah.
Just tell me no. If it's gonna be no, just tell me no, so I don't get my hopes up. You know what I'm saying? Hey, we can go to McDonald's. We'll see. Just tell me no. It's a yes or no kind of thing.
No, and I absolutely feel that way, because I literally carried 2 roster spots, at least, with how many people were hurt on my team this year, that were just like, they play. I mean, Galladay, he played in 5 games, but one of them he got hurt right away and got 0 points. So he really only scored 4 points in 4 games, and it was 17, 16, 14, 17. So it's like, those are respectable numbers when he played. So you're like, well, I got to hang on to him in case he comes back.
Well, he's still he's
and then he never does.
I almost took him at 3 in the 3rd round. I was very, very tempted to take him.
And so I do have to give you your props, though, that Miles Sanders is on your list still after having that sour taste, because a guy who carried our championship team this year, Mr. Calvin Ridley, was on my team last year. And I would not take him because he was just not good at all for me. Yeah. He was not good at all, and he didn't live up to anything. And it's funny because the guy who won the league had Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, and Joe Mixon, which are 3 players that were on my team last year that were terrible for me. And yet he won the championship with those 3 players on his team. And it's just funny and all 3 of those guys were on my I'm not touching you list this year because of how bad they were last year. Right. And how much they didn't live up to what they're going to be. And so there's certain players for me that, like, if you're just really bad for me, I really struggle to take you. And I don't know, but it was a tough season for me. It was really tough.
It happens.
It was.
We both made playoff. I lost in the finals. I got boat raced in the final. I got Stephon Diggs in the finals. So
you hate to see that.
I think I went into that Monday night because they played Monday night. Or no, it was a Sunday night game. Or was it a Monday night? It was Monday night game. Yeah, it was. I went into that game. He had to stay under 17 points essentially. And for first quarter, I think he had a catch for 2 yards. I was like, this might be, as long as he stays out of the end zone. And literally, as soon as I said that, that 50-yarder happened. And as soon as that touchdown happened, it was pretty much over. He needed like 2 or 3 more catches, but it was, with the way that they were, the offense was rolling, I was like, this is done. And then, I look up, and sure enough, he caught another one. And then I look up again, he freaking caught another one. And I was like, hey, at least if you beat me, just crush me.
And that's how I felt.
I don't want to have to play the what if game. I don't want to have to play.
Yeah.
Oh, if I would have played this guy instead
and that's
of this
exactly
guy,
how my semifinals was. My semifinals, I was the classic example of the classic example. So there used to be a show called The League, which is a little show about fantasy football, basically. It's a very good show. I enjoyed the whole show. And they referred to it as tinkering. And it's where you sit there and you look at your app, typically while you're pooping or something. You just keep looking at your lineup, trying to decide who you want to start. And I had that issue in the semifinals where I tinkered until Cam Akers ended up in my lineup, and David Montgomery, who had just got done scoring like 60 points in the last 2 weeks, wasn't. And I was like,
it happens.
But I honestly had the opinion though with David Montgomery that I figured in classic David Montgomery style, he would have those 2 big weeks and everybody would start him in that semifinals game in their playoffs, and then he would shit the bed, very David Montgomery like, and everybody would hate him. So that's what I was projecting to happen, and then he ended up not doing it. I just figured for some reason I thought Minnesota's defense was going to step up in that game a little bit more than they did. But it was what it was, and when it comes down to it, I'm just never going to have a Rams running back on my team ever again. That's basically
tough to trust him.
It's
just like the Patriots.
So Todd Gurley lost me a championship when he was hurt in the championship game, and they made him a game time decision. And my league that league I was in didn't allow you to make your roster locked Sunday at midnight, so it locked before games.
So you couldn't make a pivot 5 minutes before a game?
No. And so I thought I could because it's the championship game. So I was like, and it was a 4:00 game. So I was going to pick up whatever his name is, CJ Anderson, off the waivers. I was going to pick up CJ Anderson in place of Todd Gurley as soon as they said Todd Gurley wasn't going to play. Because it's a championship game. You're not going to not start Todd Gurley if he's playing. So I'm like, okay, well, CJ Anderson's sitting there. I'll pick him up if Todd Gurley's not playing, and I'll just swap him in and out. Find out. Can't do it. I'm like 30 minutes before the game, like messaging our commissioner, like, dude, just let me make this pickup. I didn't know that was the rule. I want to make this pickup. I'm letting you know before it even starts. Like, let me do it. And then they wouldn't let me do it. So
yikes.
So and then Cam Akers lose me the semifinals here. So Rams, sorry, your running backs are never going to be on my team ever again. It is what it is.
So before we start boring everyone with our personal fantasy experience, is there anyone in particular you're excited about this upcoming year, or is there anyone kind of on your I personally like the do not touch lists? My do not touch list typically is very personal.
Okay,
it's just like it'll be like Cam Akers.
Yes, like Cam Akers won't be on my team.
Or David Montgomery. You're just like, I'm just not touching
so actually, now that you say that, I think David Montgomery is a great example for what you just said. So David Montgomery, because of his last 5-6 weeks, his last 6 weeks, over 20 points every week in our league, in my league. He was, for the last 6 weeks, he was over 20 points every week. He is now running back number 6.
Yep.
He's going to get drafted like he was running back number 6.
Yep.
The problem is weeks 1 through 9, where he only topped 20 points one time, only topped 15 points twice. Weeks 1 to 9, only topped 15 points twice. So, I mean, he's going to be overvalued like crazy because of those last couple weeks.
Yes.
I would not touch him unless he just, for whatever reason in your league does not work out, whatever it is.
And a big reason why Montgomery towards the second half of the season saw a big influx in point prediction. One, scheduled, but two, Tariq Cohen went down, and a lot of people don't remember that. Tariq Cohen, their pass catcher, went down, so it was. That's why you saw a big boost in targets and boost of routes run for David Montgomery, which is fantastic. I think David Montgomery is a great running back, but I think he's going to get a lot overvalued because Tariq Cohen was hurt, and then people are like, oh, but David, he showed he can do it. Well, Bears signed Tariq Cohen this offseason to like a 3 or 4 year deal for like $20 or $30 million. He's not going anywhere. He's still going to be a part of the offense.
Here's my opinion on David Montgomery. If you are drafting David Montgomery, he needs to be drafted as a bench running back. You do not need to be drafting him in your starting lineup. I don't trust him.
He could be a running back too.
I don't think so, man.
He's not a guy who can carry your team.
He cannot be a running back too when he's scoring 8 points, 7 points, 5 points.
Yeah, true. Joe Mixon did the same thing aside from that 1 week, and people are going to draft him as a running back too. So
I don't know. I just can't do it. I don't trust.
The touches are there. At running back, it's one of those positions where you don't necessarily look at production. You look at how many touches you get. Do you get 15 plus touches a game? Cool. You want to be my running back 2 and or running back 3/flex player? Cool. Let's do it. Sounds great. He's a great insurance guy for the
exact same reason of David Montgomery, though. Pretty much. Very similar. I mean, not the same reason we just said, but for the same reason. Another player that I would be afraid of overvaluing next year is Josh Jacobs, because I think that what we saw this year, and maybe he hasn't been healthy a lot this year. I mean, maybe we don't know. But Josh Jacobs and David Montgomery were actually very similar this year, and they had a ton of attempts. And yes, they had some big weeks, but like Josh Jacobs is a prime example. Like he had a week against the Chargers. The week I didn't start him, actually. I started Cam Akers and not him, and would have won. But he had 76 yards on 26 attempts. He had like a 25-yard carry on the second carry of the game.
Yeah. I think he only had 3 carries of over 20 yards the entire year.
And so basically, he was one of those guys that, like, he really didn't run that well. It's like, and so to me... Well, I don't know. In fantasy, I'm looking for the guy that it only takes 1.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Yes, I'm all for attempts. I absolutely want attempts. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I don't want you to go out there and get the guy that's getting 5 attempts, but if he gets 1, it's huge. I'm not looking for that. But a guy that gets me 20 attempts, if I have the option between a guy that's getting 25 attempts or 20 attempts but has big play potential, I'm taking 20 attempts with big potential, or even 15 attempts with big potential, probably over the guy with 25 and he's running for, averaging 3 yards a carry. I'm just not, I don't know. Jacobs is another guy that I think that
he's gonna slip regardless, because this new DUI that he just got
that's
charged
true
with,
too.
that he's pleading not guilty. That it's gonna be a 3-game suspension if he is found guilty. So there's a lot of teams that aren't gonna. If you're drafting a fantasy team, he's not gonna be.
How does one plead not guilty to a DUI?
Yeah, that's what I said.
You get pulled over, they say you're drunk. He's like,
I guess it's
I'm
one
not
of those
driving.
Where he just pleads non-guilty until he gets his lawyer involved, and then they find out exactly what they're going to do about it, throughout the offseason. But he's a guy that you're going to be able to steal because he's a great value if you can get him super, super late in a draft.
Right.
If you already know you're going to eat 3 games of him, but know that he's going to be a starting running back, great pickup if you can get him.
Well, the other thing is, too, with running backs, it doesn't hurt to draft guys kind of like that. Because in the grand scheme of things, that helps you because that's less mileage on their legs. If they get some games off, because if he misses 3 games and has a bye, well, that's 4 weeks that he didn't have to run. And so later in the season, he's going to be healthier than someone else's running back. So that could be a very great late round pickup at running back. Right. Like there's a lot of players that, you don't necessarily want to deal with because maybe, like a wide receiver may not understand how the offense is being used if he's been suspended. He hasn't been a part of the offensive scheme and stuff like that. But a running back, running backs kind of do the same thing everywhere, just about. I mean, with the odd exception of the Christian McCaffreys that get 800 passes dumped to them a game. Most people are very similar schemes for running backs. So if you can get guys that have that big running back potential, but later in drafts, that's always huge. I think it'll be
Yeah.
interesting. It after this year though, it's very interesting with guys like Jonathan Taylor and Antonio Gibson like breaking out, and it feels like there was a lot of breakout running backs.
Taylor's a late first rounder for me.
It
Late
just
first round, early second round.
so
You can draft him as an RB1 confidently.
for me, the last couple years in my league, we're a full point PPR. I've been drafting a lot of running backs, and I'm starting to wonder if I need to go early with my wide receivers because I keep getting more value out of my late round running backs than I do my early round running backs,
Yeah.
and it's kind of leaving that sour taste in my mouth when like last year I drafted Kamara. I drafted Kamara at 3, and guess who was hurt the whole year? Oh, guess who then drafts McCaffrey this year, and now he's hurt the whole year. And I'm just kind of like, you know what? I just want to go out and draft one of these stud wide receivers who puts up 20, 25 points a week
and be done with it.
And be done
just
with
let
it.
him carry.
Yeah, I mean, I look at I know Devontae Adams is a guy who's had injuries in his past. Like he's an injury prone wide receiver. He wasn't too bad this year, obviously. But then you just see like every week, Devontae Adams, 2 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns, 2 touchdowns. You're just like, Jesus Christ, how many touchdowns can this guy get? I mean, he was like every
he's a target
week.
Monster.
And that's
He's a target
it
monster,
makes me
Aaron
just
Rodgers looks for him in the end zone.
and that's what it makes me just I just want to grab one of those guys in the first round next year. Like I'm kind of just like I'm kind of sick of this first round running back thing. Now, don't get me wrong, the reason I have always been able to stock up on running backs like we said, I had Jacobs, Carson, McCaffrey, and Drake. So I had 4 stud running backs right there. Well, the year before, my first 3 picks were Kamara, Mixon, Chubb. I had 3 stud running backs there. Yeah. So it's like, it's not working out for me. And so I kind of just, it's just killing me.
You have to develop a strategy. I use mock drafts to develop a strategy on where I go. Because
and the problem I'm having
is,
you
gotta know what you have to have a game plan.
The tough part I've always had is like both these teams, if healthy, probably win the league. And so, like, there's part of me that says the strategy's working. I'm drafting really good teams. Fantasy football is just killing me. But then it's also that there's part of me that's like, I'm so sick of this bad luck. Let's change up the strategy. You know, so that's where it's tough. Yeah. It's like
I'm tired of watching those guys score. I want them on my team. The guys. That
but it's like seriously though,
week.
Like 2 years ago, Mixon was a dud until the end of the season. Kamara was hurt the whole year. Chubb got hurt right in the middle of the year. So it's like. And then I had, Ridley, who didn't live up to it, and Boyd didn't live up to potential. So it's like I had a pretty good team there. And if I had that team this year, I mean, if I had Ridley and Kamara on the same team, that's a stud team again. So it's like the years that I draft people, it just doesn't seem to be working out for me.
Yeah,
but I think it's interesting. So I wonder. I'm thinking about. I've been trying to decide if I want to switch up my because I had heard rumors that going into this season that I had known that like so you had told me your draft strategy going into this year was those mid-round wide receivers. You wanted to ride your mid-round wide receivers. That's what you were going for, and I know like you hit with a mid-round.
Terry McLaurin, AJ Brown, DK Metcalf. And Lockett's a mid-round guy.
Yeah,
Portland
unfortunately,
Sutton, even though he got hurt,
AJ Brown and McLaurin kind of had their ups and downs. Where obviously
they had their ebbs and flows, but they still finished up as wide receiver ones. If my wide receiver ends up with 1,000+ yards, I'm totally happy. Right. If the touchdowns come, they come. That's fine. But
you can't draft touchdowns.
If both your wide receivers have 1,000+ yards, you're fine.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You're doing something right.
But, that definitely worked out for you.
Yeah, that's where I was targeting and that was why I went so running back heavy in the first few rounds because going through mock drafts and whatnot, going from I would do different draft positions because I don't know when I'm drafting until like 3 or 4 days before our actual draft. So I'm just kind of piecing together like, okay, if it's first round, obviously the consensus is McCaffrey, but the second one's coming back, trying to get a little more value as it goes on. So whenever I found out that I was a 5th pick. It was really up in the air. I was like, I don't know who I want. Do I want Michael Thomas? Do I want Derrick Henry? Do I want, this, that, or the other? I was like, you know what? Cook has the best chance to be a running back 1 of all the other guys that are left over like a Jones, guys like that. And I was like, I think it's a no-brainer. I have to go Cook. But the thing with going Cook was I had to draft Madison. So I ended up drafting Madison in like the 11th or 12th round. So I actually drafted Madison. It wasn't on waivers. I had to draft Madison, but I also wanted to draft a really good running back 3 that I could either use as a flex guy, but also plug in just in case Cook does miss time. That's his
Right.
Achilles heel is getting hurt. So I ended up grabbing Connor in like the 3rd round, but ended up flipping him after like week 4 in a trade. So he did well for me whenever I had him, but that was the idea. Like, hey, a high upside guy, but. Yeah, going into the draft, it was the mid-round wide receivers. Those are the guys I had to hit on, and that was the AJ Browns, the Terry McLaurins, the DK Metcalfs,
Yeah,
the
and I had
Cortland
heard,
Suttons of the world.
and it was interesting too because I remember you telling me that, and it was interesting because I had just got done reading articles about how there were some fantasy people saying going into this year that draft wide receivers early because the mid-round running backs were going to be really good, and really it just seemed like there was just a lot of mid-round talent this year. I mean, all around, you kind of, if you knew what you were looking for, you hit on quite a few players this year.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you knew who you were looking for, you hit on. I mean, there were people in my league drafting like Larry Fitzgerald around the time that I'm drafting Antonio Gibson.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, that
it's because they don't do the research.
It's
a
like
big name.
When
He's
you
a
get
big name.
when
and
you
like,
get
cool,
you get right, and my dad, who is a big time fantasy sports player who wins many leagues, has won a good amount of money in his life. He always tells me like, you draft your starting lineup, but your bench players are all upside. You carry your entire bench of upside players until you have to get somebody else. If you got to pick somebody else up, you got to pick them up. But you go for your bench players don't need to be guys. They need to be upside. Like, you don't want to just get a guy. Like, the biggest thing that I always see is like these people that are carrying these wide receivers that like they average 10 points a week, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool if I have to play him, but it's like 10 points a week isn't going to win you the week anyways. So why am I not carrying this guy who could potentially be a league-winning running back in the second half of the year?
In the late rounds, you're looking for potential league winners, guys that may just emerge, and
you're not going to hit. You're not always going to hit.
Diggs that gets 100+ catches, leads the league in catches. Like, that's a league winner. I'm sure most people that drafted Stephon Diggs ended up at least making the playoffs, if not making the finals, if not winning their actual championship.
Unless they were the kind of like my league where they drafted Stephon Diggs as a guy. And their team was not very good to begin with.
Right,
and
exactly.
So the tough part with my league is they draft really heavy wide receivers like right off the rip. So it's like,
I mean, you were able to have all those.
I'm like, it's like,
I have to take.
Well, yeah, because it's like when
there's no good wide receivers left, but like,
it's like
you're Kenyon Drake sitting there.
Yeah, you're sitting there in the board in the 3rd round, and you're like, do I want Chris Carson, who's averages 25 points a week, or do I want Tyler Boyd as a wide receiver? It's like, okay, well, I want Chris. Exactly. I'll take Chris Carson on my bench over Tyler Boyd in my starting lineup. Like,
exactly. And I remember whenever you were actually going through the draft, you're like, hey, this guy's available, and I'm like, dude, who are you drafting with? Because my brain is in an absolute pretzel. How are these guys?
I remember because I drafted McCaffrey, and then it came all back around, and I took Galladay and Jacobs, and then it came back down to me, and I took Lockett and Carson, or I took Lockett and Drake, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I asked you, I was like, who do you like better, Drake or Carson? And I think we had come up to Drake, and then
I came out with Drake.
Yeah, we had both said, okay, we like Drake better. And I think even my dad said that too, because I had asked him. And so we took Drake, and then it came back all the way around. I was like, okay, well, Carson I was like, well, Carson's still available.
Carson's
so,
but we can do a whole podcast leading up into the draft season. We can kind of gear some of the listeners towards what I think. I do a lot of mock drafts, so it's one of those things that I can maybe start kind of gearing towards, towards the end of the summer and whatnot as the draft season starts to kind of take a project. We can kind of try to get you guys in a, if you did a fantasy draft this year and you absolutely stunk it up, or your fantasy league and you're just not sure, I'd love to help you out and try to give you a few little tips and tidbits that I've had. So I've played 3 fantasy seasons I've made in my entire life. So this last one was my third
Yeah,
fantasy
you're kind of
season.
new to this.
I've made the playoffs every single year. I've made the finals the last 2 years and lost both of them. I'm in a very, very competitive league with guys who have been playing for decades. And it's one of those things that I hated football going into it. And then I played fantasy football, and it was
Well, and
I'm good.
it's known on this little
I
podcast
like
here
it. I
that
like it a lot, man.
it's known on this little podcast here that my favorite football team is my fantasy football team. And that I'm not really that big
absolutely,
of a not really that big
football fan.
I'm not a
like
big
watching
football fan. I'm a big fantasy football fan.
But things that may shake up the fantasy, some of these. Have you heard kind of the NFL rumors that are coming out of some of the teams that haven't, that didn't make? Have you heard some of these rumors that kind of surfaced today?
No, I didn't.
So apparently, rumor has it that Deshaun Watson wants out of
Yes, I have
Houston.
heard this.
He has reached out to a few teammates and basically said, I don't know exactly what he says verbatim, but basically it was just like, hey, don't take it personal if I request a trade to come out of here. So it's like,
yeah, I heard that, like obviously
interesting.
Houston has really screwed him his whole time being there anyways. But then I guess they told him
the Hopkins trade really screwed him.
Yeah, they've done nothing to help him on that team. And so and then apparently they were telling him he was going to be involved in the GM and the coach hiring, and then they hired a GM without saying a word to him.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. They'll tell you anything you want to, get you in bed, essentially. So,
right.
The thing that I see as far as Deshaun Watson's concerned, like I think the DeAndre Hopkins one really there's no way he was a fan of it, but you got to think, Bill O'Brien and the Houston Texans, they were like, we can keep one of these guys. We only have enough money to keep one of these guys. At the time, DeAndre Hopkins wanted a contract extension. He didn't want it. He was going to hold out if he didn't get the contract extension coming into the year. And they knew Deshaun Watson's contract was up at the end of this year. So, hey, he needed his contract extension too. They're like, we only have enough money to get one of these guys. So which one do we want? And that's why they ended up going with, Deshaun Watson. And I think that they had told Deshaun Watson, hey, this upcoming offseason, Bill O'Brien basically said like, hey, this upcoming offseason, there are a few big names, as far as wide receivers that are going to be available. We're going to see what we can do to help you out. Allen Robinson's available. Kenny Galladay's available. There's a lot of good talent that's there. Just stick with us, for this season. We got your contract. It's going to be a rough season. Stick with us. Next offseason, we'll kind of start rebuilding everything back up. And I think once Bill O'Brien went out, and the new GM came in, and Deshaun Watson was like, yeah, we were going to help rebuild it. And he was like, I didn't tell you that, and then now Deshaun Watson's like, well, I don't really want to spend my career avoiding sacks the entire time. So it's really interesting what they have going on in Houston. And it makes you believe.
Where do you think would be really interesting for Deshaun Watson to end up?
Aside from what
right,
teams in the NFL, it's just like a Lindor.
Which place would you be like, if he ended up like?
So, and we can play this game like super easily, and I think it's the value that he's going to require in a trade is if Jalen Ramsey was 2 first-round picks. And Jamal Adams was 2 first-round picks. What does a guy like Deshaun Watson demand on the trade market?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? You probably just have to get. I mean, at least 2 first-round picks. Either this year or one this year, one next year, because the Texans are going to want to build immediately. They're not wanting to get your first-round pick 5 years later. They want probably your first 3 picks for the next 2 years, which is big. But for a team that is ready to rock, it makes sense. But immediately to me, like, the Patriots are interesting, man. They really are, but I don't see that happening.
So I've got 3 teams that
a team like the Colts.
I was
would
thinking
be really interesting because Philip Rivers is out. They're ready to win. They got a good defense. They got a great offensive line. Can you imagine what that guy would do? Yeah.
What about a team like
Pittman on the outside?
What about a team? I'm not as good of a team, but a team like Atlanta.
Yeah,
But
I don't think so.
you could give him Julio
Atlanta,
Jones. You could give him.
no. So, and that's another thing. Apparently, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones are on the trade market, and they're going to explore trades this offseason.
Interesting. Okay, so
Atlanta's going to explore.
here is a very
if he goes
unlikely
somewhere,
but
it's going to
really
be a
interesting.
contender. It's going to be a player that.
Here's one that I think is very interesting that I just came up with. The Washington Football Club.
Oh, love it.
With McLaurin, Gibson, that defense.
Look at the
that
numbers
team
that Terry
would be
McLaurin has put up
nuts.
with no one at quarterback right
that
now.
team
Look at the
would
numbers
be.
that guy has
I
put
mean,
up.
they've
He's
got weapons that are young. You bring in
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson. Oh my God, that team. That would be it. That would be the one that I'm like,
yeah.
ooh,
and
ooh.
Ron Rivera can handle a mobile quarterback.
I would be into
that. with Cam Newton when he was with the Panthers. And honestly, I think that the Washington football team, they're a quarterback away from me. They're already a contender, and
right, they're in the playoffs.
He went 6-9. Yeah, they went 6-9, but they
had a good defense.
They went 5-1 with Alex Smith.
Yeah.
So essentially they are all the other games are Dwayne Haskins controlled.
Right,
so
and Dwayne Haskins literally is out of football because he's so bad.
With a competent quarterback that uses all of his receivers, with a competent quarterback that can control the ball, that is responsible with the football, they were a 5-1 team, and their defense is ready to win now.
Yeah,
so
that would be awesome. Yeah, that would be cool.
It makes sense. It's all a matter of what they're going to ask for. It's all a matter of what they're going to ask for. I think it's going to be really hard for them to trade Deshaun Watson, especially with a new coach, new GM coming in. The very last thing they're going to do is trade their number one focal piece of a team that they know they're going to have to rebuild. Those are instant wins, instant fans, grabbers. Yeah. But at the same time,
because right now, if you get rid of Watson, who's selling your tickets?
Right, exactly.
And in football, it's all about selling tickets.
Yeah, I really think that the Houston Texans are going to cut J.J. Watt this offseason too, because it's a $17 million hit if he starts the season with them, and it's a $0 hit if they cut him. So it does not cost them any money to not have him.
Which is tough because he's such a good guy. He's been so great for the city.
To be on a better team.
Yeah, he just he's always hurt.
He's already a Hall of Famer. Let him go chase a ring, But I don't know. I mean, if the Texans were going to do something like this, this is the year to do it. Plenty of quarterbacks in that draft.
That's true.
As long as you get one of those top 5, you're going to end up with a Lawrence, a Fields, or a Taylor. So I mean, one of those 3. So hypothetically, let's say you're the Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay.
Oh.
Would you trade that first overall pick and maybe some future picks and whatnot? But would you give up that 101 pick for the instant Deshaun Watson? Or do you want to take the possibility of Fields or Lawrence?
I think if nothing else, you got to consider it. I mean, because you got to consider this is a proven guy that's shown he can do it with nothing. He can do it with no one on his team.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine him having Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark right there, and James Robinson out of the backfield? I mean. Offense is ready to rock. You just got to get a few pieces of defense. But hey, getting a Deshaun Watson on your team. Hey, I know we went 1-15 last year.
And I think it adds value.
Do you want to come play defense for us? They're going to be like, no.
And it adds some big value too to say like, hey, you can get Lawrence or
It's something to think about, man.
With all the hype around the quarterbacks in this draft too, it makes it very valuable. That pick is very valuable now.
It's weird. It's crazy. What about even the Dolphins? They have 2 first-round picks this year.
I saw.
What about them giving up that number 3 overall pick?
CBS was one of the first people that came out with a mock draft. And they had the Dolphins drafting a quarterback.
Well, and it's just because the quarterback talent right now is just so good. It's so good. Like you almost have to take.
Not to mention the fact that let's be honest, like I never once saw Tua and was like, wow, he looks impressive.
Yeah, he doesn't have it to me, but
he looks scared. He looks too scared, and Logan says that all the time that he's afraid to make mistakes, and you just can't be like that, man. You just can't do it.
But a team like the Jets, do you trade your? I don't think the Jets are ready. I think the Jaguars are much more suitable for
the Jets.
They get Deshaun Watson.
Deshaun Watson
at least a 500.
If I'm Deshaun Watson, I'm kind of pissed if I go to the Jets because you're basically going from the exact same thing to the other thing.
He wouldn't do that. And I don't think the Jets would even.
Yeah, it's like the same thing. It's the same thing as what they've already done
now. What? So we can throw to Denzel Mims and Brashard Perriman? Like,
Right.
no, he's not going to go for that, and I don't think he really has a say in it. But I don't think the Jets are like, hey, we can't really give up the future of our team, our next 3 years
what
worth
about
of
the
draft picks.
Bears? Do you think the Bears say, you know what, we're done with Trubisky, let's take Deshaun Watson?
I think had they not made the playoffs, I think it's possible. But since they made the playoffs, I don't think so. But they already have enough problems they need to try to keep Allen Robinson there.
Right.
So they already have enough money problems alone to stacking in, Deshaun Watson's contract. The only way that he gets moved is, and obviously, this is completely different. There are no prospects in football. They're all
Right.
draft picks.
Right.
That's where everything is sourced from. The only way that he gets moved is if they get they get a good pick in return, and it has to be a top 5 pick this year of some kind.
Yeah.
So they can.
Well, yeah, because new
that,
ownership needs to get something to get the fans hyped about after getting rid of their face of their franchise.
And they basically just have to say, I have to get one of those 3 big names in the quarterback room on the board this year. If that's not happening, then we're not moving him. And who's to say Deshaun Watson can ask for all he wants? Right. GM's finally like, hey, listen, I respect what you want, but at the end of the day, it's my call. And if I don't see a fit, then we're going to keep you because we signed you to a contract. So if you're along for the rebuild, then you're along for the rebuild. But I don't know. We'll see. The Patriots seem interesting just because, like, we already know they're moving on from Cam. We don't know who they're going to get. But keep in mind, Jimmy Garoppolo is also going to be out there. There's a few other, big name quarterbacks that are going to be free agents that could lure someone.
And that makes the 49ers interesting for Watson as well. Because
true.
Ayuk's
they're
a
ready
stud.
to go, obviously. I just don't see the Patriots doing a move like that. They've never been a team to go and get the big splash guys. They're always the guys that, they make $10 out of a dime. They get those bargain ones.
Like the Cardinals of football.
Can they learn how to draft a wide receiver? Are we kidding? Are we kidding with this?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you have to be
was their
white
first
to
overall
be
pick, and I think he has like 50 targets over the last 2 years.
I think they have to be white to be a good wide receiver on the Patriots.
I know. They what was it? Amendola and Edelman.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. Like, their wide receiver core is so terrible, and then they missed so bad with Sanu. They gave up a 2nd-round pick for Sanu, and they were like, "All right, this guy sucks. Like, this is not the answer here." I don't see the Patriots doing something like that. Just because that's not really Belichick's style. I'm sure he would love to have a Deshaun Watson, but that's not really how they. They didn't give Tom Brady the money. And that it was a money thing. So I doubt they jump into a massive contract like that when their team is not necessarily ready.
And not to mention after a COVID season too. I mean, that's the thing.
Exactly.
We talked all about that with the baseball offseason.
If he goes, it's going to take an absolute haul of draft picks like you've never seen before, and I think it's hard to do. But it's fun to use this as an exercise. Like, you and I just we're like, hey, what about this? What about that?
Yeah, it does. It's got me intrigued, and it makes me want Washington to push for him, though. Like, I would love that.
Honestly, even if they don't, I obviously Alex Smith is not the guy that's going to take them to promised land. Who knows? They have a freaking playoff game this weekend. They could always do it. Who knows? But he's just not the guy. But that team is so offensively talented. It's crazy. And their defense is ready to go. I mean, Washington is a team that could win 10-plus games next year, and I would absolutely see it. But they got to get a little better at quarterback. And, their quarterback has to use I like Alex Smith. He uses he spreads the ball out a lot. So it's nice to see,
he's kind of like a clock management quarterback. Like, he's not going to hurt you. But he's not really gonna. He's not gonna be the guy on the stat sheet. That's why you won either.
Exactly. So they are a quarterback away, and there are plenty of quarterbacks that are going to be available. So who knows? I don't think Alex Smith is going to stick.
Do we want to do a quick little playoff pick'em here? See who?
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
So Indy Buffalo first game. Who you got?
Buffalo.
I also go Buffalo. I think Indy's good, but I think Buffalo's just better.
Buffalo's better. Indy's good. Buffalo's better. That would be my summarization. Next one.
Rams Seahawks.
I have Seattle just because Goff. I don't know what his status is. They just played each other last week. I think that Pete Carroll's going to have a good scheme, dialed up to maybe get DK a little more space on Ramsey.
Yeah,
But the bottom line, they have Lockett on the other side, and they still have Russ. I know the Seahawks are kind of limping into the playoffs, but I still think
feel like
they're
the
a better
Rams
team than the
kind of are
Rams.
too.
They're a better
Though.
team than
The
the
Rams
Rams.
aren't. The Rams aren't looking strong going to the playoffs by any means. So.
They're a better team than the Rams.
So yeah, I think I'll go Seahawks as well.
Yep.
Tampa Bay, Washington.
See, this is really interesting to me. So
two good defenses.
Two really good defenses, but Washington's better up front. They have a better front seven. But Tampa Bay has better offense. So
right.
It's one of those ones I've really gone back and forth. I would not be surprised. We saw what Tampa Bay does against really good defenses, and I've seen them, light really good defenses up, and I've seen them actually get shut down this year by really good defenses. I wouldn't be shocked if Washington won, but I'm going to go Bucks if Mike Evans plays. If Mike Evans does not play, I think it's 50-50, and I would absolutely pivot back Washington. I think they're a really good team. I don't think they can win the whole thing, but I think they could steal a show because their defensive line up front is just nasty, and they're not expected to win. They're the underdogs here.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay is expected to win. So
I think for me, I always look at defense and then I look at quarterback, which makes me go Tampa Bay here. I think both defenses are good,
right.
And then you just got to give the experience to Tom Brady in the playoffs against a team that maybe feels like they don't even necessarily deserve to be there, but they are.
They're hungry though. If you go Tampa Bay, I'll go Washington.
I would go Tampa Bay.
I think they're hungry. They have momentum.
Yeah.
If any team's going to do it, and I think this is the last team Tampa Bay wanted to pull in the playoffs. They could choose any other team in the in their conference, and it would be fine. And I think it would be like, like they probably get pretty good. I think Washington's the last team they wanted to face.
Well, and Tampa Bay has not looked great against what's considered good teams, and Washington's been a good team lately.
Yes.
And so
I'm
going Tampa. I'm going Tampa
to
Bay.
Split it off. I'll go Washington just so we're a little different.
Baltimore, Tennessee.
Close. I go defense here because Tennessee is absolutely leaking like a sieve. I'm going Baltimore.
Interesting. I'm going Tennessee. I just don't think Baltimore's as good as. I don't know. I just don't think Baltimore's that great. I'm not a big buyer on them this year. They don't look that great.
Don't get me wrong. I love Tennessee. I don't know.
I think Tennessee's.
No one's found out a way to defend Lamar Jackson yet. So.
Yeah. I guess I don't know.
And Tennessee upset them last year in the AFC or their first playoff game last year.
I think Tennessee wins this one. Though. I'm not a buyer on Baltimore. I haven't liked what I've seen this year out of them. Personally,
Tennessee just doesn't have a good enough defense for me to get by even a okay offense like Baltimore.
All right,
they just don't have the run stopping to me. I think that Baltimore runs all over them.
Chicago, New Orleans.
New Orleans,
yeah. Chicago's not good.
Easy. No,
so
they just barely snuck in. I just think that
their hot start got them in.
Yeah,
they're kind of like the Cubs. During this shortened season, they played so well. The Saints are
too good. They're too dynamic, and they have Kamara back. Like he just tweeted out like see you Sunday or whatever it was. Like he's back. Had it not been Kamara, like Latavius Murray is still pretty damn good. So I don't think so. You can be as good as you want, but when your defense is going to be on the field for 40 plus minutes, it doesn't help. So
yeah. Cleveland, Pittsburgh.
Interesting. Very interesting.
It became interesting. At the start of the year, you wouldn't have thought
Stefanski got rolled out.
Yeah.
I've been kind of tossing this back and forth, and for a while, I was really on Cleveland, upsetting them. But when their coach went out, I think I kind of pivoted back Pittsburgh. Not confident, but I'm going to say Pittsburgh, but I can easily be persuaded to the Browns. Which one are you going with?
I think I got to take Pittsburgh here.
Okay, then I'll take Cleveland.
I just don't know that Cleveland can win this.
I'll take Cleveland.
I don't know. Cleveland to me just kind of comes across as the team that's not going to win a playoff game. Like they're just not, I don't know. They just don't come across as that team. Like I
just don't trust Pittsburgh's
They seem like
offense.
they just come across as a team to me in my mind as a team that will choke in the playoffs and just
absolutely. I totally get it, but Pittsburgh I could literally see doing the exact same thing. Going 11-0, and then their offense just isn't there.
And Pittsburgh
they're just not synced
had
up.
such
I think
a
Ben
cupcake schedule
Roethlisberger's
this
hurt.
year too, and that's what's tough.
I think Ben Roethlisberger's hurt, and he's been kind of hiding that. I think there's a lower body injury, which is why he throws a lot of like short passes unless he gets good protection. Then he throws a deep ball. I mean, he's out of the shotgun a whole bunch. I think that's why they didn't do a lot of running plays, is because he is hurt. He can't really get back to the running back to get it to him, in enough time to open up that hole. It's I think there's been something going on with Ben since like week 2 or 3.
Well, and so here's my deal though. Cleveland just got done beating Pittsburgh 24-22
with their backups. I
with
know.
Mason Rudolph playing.
Yeah, I
so
get it.
and James Conner had 9 carries. I don't know.
They can't run the ball. And Ben Roethlisberger, I don't know. We'll
I don't see Cleveland being able to beat them with Big Ben in there, so that's why I got to take Pittsburgh.
I'm gonna go Cleveland. I'm gonna go Cleveland just because you're going Pittsburgh, and just because I can argue on both sides.
That's fair. That's fair enough. But we are at a solid hour and 40 minutes on those 2 hours.
Are we doing the other 2 picks? Let's see. Let's hurry it up.
That was everybody.
Was everyone? I thought we only did 4.
We did 6. Cleveland, Pittsburgh.
Cleveland,
Pittsburgh's the 7:15 Sunday game.
That's right. That's right. It's because we rifled off 2 real quick ones.
Yeah.
Well, damn, I didn't think it was going to be this long. I'm sorry for taking up so much time.
No, we always go pretty long. We had one that was like 2 hours long one time. So, hey everybody, thank you so much for stopping by the Last Inning Touchdown podcast. Sam, thank you so much for helping us out this week. If you guys haven't, make sure you like and subscribe to this video on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on Spotify so you know when those new podcasts come up. I will see you guys next week.
Peace.